Part 1. The Foundling. The morning mist hung thick over the jungle canopy of Vex Thara as Dr. Marcus Chen pushed through the dense undergrowth. His boots squelched in the muddy ground, and sweat dripped down his face despite the cool morning air. He had been walking for 3 hours, collecting plant samples for the research station's database. Marcus stopped when he heard a strange sound. It was soft, almost like crying. He looked around, pushing aside large purple leaves that blocked his view. The sound came again, weaker this time. "What the hell?" Marcus whispered to himself. He followed the sound deeper into the jungle until he found a clearing. In the center lay the remains of what looked like a massive nest. Broken branches and torn leaves were scattered everywhere. Dark stains on the ground told him there had been a fight here. The crying sound came from behind a fallen log. Marcus approached carefully. He had been on Vex Thara for 2 years and knew the jungle held many dangerous creatures. But when he looked behind the log, his heart stopped. There, half buried under debris, was an egg. It was black as night and about the size of his head. Small cracks ran across its surface, and from inside came that soft crying sound. Marcus knew exactly what he was looking at. A shadow maw egg. His hands shook as he carefully lifted it. The egg was warm and felt alive in his hands. Inside, something was moving, trying to break free. "No, no, no," Marcus muttered. "This is bad. This is very bad." Shadow maws were the most feared predators on Vex Thara. The native Cathani people told stories of these creatures that could hunt in complete darkness and kill with a single bite. Full-grown shadow maws were the size of earth elephants, with razor-sharp claws and teeth like swords. But this was just a baby, an abandoned baby. Marcus looked around the destroyed nest again. 2 adult shadow maws had fought here, probably over territory. The loser was dead or driven away, leaving this egg behind. In a few hours, the jungle scavengers would find it. The egg cracked louder. Whatever was inside was running out of time. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He wrapped the egg in his jacket and started the long walk back to the research station. The Terran research station on Vex Thara was small, just 5 buildings connected by covered walkways. It housed 12 human scientists who studied the planet's unique ecosystem. The station sat on a hill overlooking the Cathani village of Razak Thul, where Princess Zara Lin ruled over 3,000 warriors. Marcus burst through the main lab door, still carrying the wrapped egg. "Sarah! Mike! Anyone!" he called out. Dr. Sarah Kim looked up from her microscope. She was the station's chief biologist and Marcus's closest friend. "What's got you so worked up?" Marcus unwrapped the egg and placed it on the examination table. Sarah's face went white. "Marcus, please tell me that's not what I think it is. It's a shadow maw egg. I found it abandoned in the jungle." "Are you insane?" Sarah backed away from the table. "We need to destroy that thing right now." "It's just a baby, Sarah. It's a baby monster. Do you know what the Cathani will do to us if they find out we're harboring this thing?" Before Marcus could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed on the walls. "External contact," came the voice over the intercom. "Cathani delegation approaching." Through the lab windows, Marcus could see them, coming up the hill. 20 Cathani warriors in their traditional armor, with Princess Zara Lin leading them. The Cathani looked like humans, but were taller and stronger, with skin that ranged from deep blue to purple. Their eyes glowed softly in the dim light. "They know," Sarah whispered. "Somehow they know." The station's main door opened with a hiss. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. And then Princess Zara Lin entered the lab. Zara Lin was impressive, even by Cathani standards. Nearly 7 feet tall, with dark purple skin and silver hair braided with metal rings. Her armor was decorated with the teeth and claws of creatures she had killed in battle. Her glowing white eyes fixed on the egg immediately. "Human," she said in accented English, "you will give me that abomination." Marcus stepped between her and the table. "Your Highness, with respect, this is a Terran research facility. You have no authority here." Zaralin's hand moved to the sword at her side. "That creature has killed thousands of my people over the centuries. I have every right to destroy it. It hasn't killed anyone. It hasn't even hatched yet. And it will never hatch if I have anything to say about it." The egg gave a loud crack. Everyone in the room froze. Through the crack, Marcus could see movement inside. "Please," Marcus said quietly, "just let me explain." Zaralin's warriors moved closer, their weapons ready, but the princess held up a hand to stop them. "Explain what? How you plan to raise a demon? How you will teach it to be gentle? You humans know nothing of shadow maws." "I know about animal behavior. I've studied predator species on 12 different worlds. Shadow maws aren't born evil. They're made that way by their environment." "You speak nonsense." The egg cracked again, louder, this time. A small piece of shell fell away. Marcus spoke quickly. "On Earth, we had creatures called wolves. For thousands of years, humans feared them as monsters. But some humans learned to raise wolf pups with kindness and patience. Those wolves became dogs, loyal, protective companions. Shadow maws are not wolves, no, but the principle is the same. Any creature can be shaped by how it's raised. This baby has no parents, no pack to teach it violence. I can raise it differently." Zaralin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You cannot change a creature's nature with kind words and gentle touches. Let me try. And when it grows large enough to tear you apart? When its instincts overcome? Your training? What then?" Marcus looked at the cracking egg, then back at the princess. "Then you can say, 'I told you so,' while you kill us both." The room fell silent except for the sound of the hatching egg. More pieces of shell fell away, revealing glimpses of something dark moving inside. Zaralin studied Marcus for a long moment. Her glowing eyes seemed to see right through him. "You are either the bravest human I have ever met, or the most foolish," she said finally. "Very well. Kethani law forbids me from destroying you or your station without proper cause. But know this, human. When that creature shows its true nature, when it spills blood as all shadow maws do, you will face the consequences." She turned to leave, then stopped. "And when that day comes, do not expect mercy from me or my people." The princess and her warriors left as quickly as they had come. Marcus collapsed into a chair, his legs shaking from adrenaline. "Marcus," Sarah said softly. "Look." He turned to see that the egg had finally broken open. A small creature, no bigger than a house cat, lay curled in the broken shells. Its scales were midnight black, and its eyes glowed like tiny yellow stars. The baby shadow maw looked up at Marcus and made a soft chirping sound. Despite everything, the danger, the threats, the uncertainty, Marcus smiled. "Hello there, little one," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." Part 2. Growing Pains. 3 months had passed since Shadow hatched. That was what Marcus named the little shadow maw. Shadow. The creature had grown fast, now the size of a medium dog with sleek black scales that seemed to absorb light. Its yellow eyes were brighter too, and definitely more intelligent. Marcus sat at his desk updating his research notes. Shadow lay curled up beside his chair, making a soft, purring sound. It was hard to believe this gentle creature would grow into the monster. That terrified the Kethani. "Time for your walk, Shadow," Marcus said, standing up. The creature's head snapped up immediately. Its tail wagged like an excited puppy, though the tail had small spikes along its length now. Marcus had established a routine: 3 walks per day, regular feeding times, and constant training. He used the same methods that worked on Earth with aggressive dog breeds, patience, consistency, and positive reinforcement. Shadow followed Marcus outside, staying close to his side without a leash. The creature had learned to heel, sit, and stay on command. It even played fetch, though it brought back sticks that were completely shredded by its razor-sharp teeth. "Good boy," Marcus said, scratching behind Shadow's head spikes. The creature's purring grew louder. Dr. Sarah Kim watched from the lab window, shaking her head. "I still can't believe you're treating that thing like a pet." Marcus ignored her. Shadow was more than a pet. It was family now. The creature slept in Marcus's room, followed him everywhere, and showed genuine affection. It had never shown any aggression toward the humans at the station. But Marcus knew the real test was coming soon. He needed to take Shadow to the Cathani village for supplies. The station was running low on food, and the monthly supply drop was late. The next morning, Marcus and Shadow walked down the hill toward Razakthul village. The Cathani settlement was built around a series of stone platforms connected by rope, bridges. Purple and blue banners hung from tall poles, and the smell of cooking fires filled the air. Shadow stayed close to Marcus, but its head turned constantly, taking in all the new sights and smells. The creature's yellow eyes were wide with curiosity. They reached the village market without incident. The Cathani vendors stared at Shadow but kept their distance. A few hands moved to weapons, but no one drew steel. Marcus bought rice, dried, meat, and water purification tablets from Trader Vektar, an old Cathani who had dealt with humans before. "Your beast grows larger," Vektar commented, his glowing eyes fixed on Shadow. "He's still young," Marcus replied. "And he's not a beast. He's very gentle." Vektar made a sound that might have been laughter. "All Shadow Maw cubs seem gentle until they taste blood." Marcus was about to respond when a commotion broke out nearby. A group of Cathani children had been playing in the market square, chasing each other with wooden swords. One child, a girl no more than 6 years old, tripped and fell hard on the stone ground. She started crying loudly. Shadow's head snapped toward the sound. The creature's entire body went rigid, and its yellow eyes locked onto the crying child. "Shadow, stay," Marcus commanded quietly. But something primal had awakened in the young Shadow Maw. Before Marcus could grab him, Shadow broke away and ran toward the child. "No!" Marcus shouted, running after him. The Cathani in the market screamed. Warriors drew their weapons. Parents grabbed their children and pulled them away. Shadow reached the fallen girl in seconds. The creature was much larger than her, his black scales gleaming in the sunlight. His mouth opened, revealing rows of sharp teeth. The girl looked up at Shadow and stopped crying. Her eyes went wide with terror. For a moment, everything was perfectly still. Then Shadow did something no one expected. He lowered his head and gently nuzzled the girl's arm with his snout. He made soft, chirping sounds, the same comforting noise he made when Marcus was sad. The girl stared at Shadow for a moment, then reached out and touched his scales. Shadow's tail wagged, but the watching Cathani saw something different. They saw a predator standing over their child, calculating and dangerous. They saw the intelligence in those yellow eyes, the same intelligence their ancestors had learned to fear. "Kill it!" someone shouted. "Kill the demon before it acts!" Spears and swords pointed at Shadow from all directions. The creature looked around in confusion, not understanding why everyone was afraid. "Wait!" Marcus threw himself between Shadow and the weapons. "He didn't hurt her. He was trying to help." "Stand aside, human." Commander Thekvol pushed through the crowd, his sword already drawn. "That abomination dies today." Shadow growled for the first time since hatching. It was a low, rumbling sound that made the ground vibrate. The creature stepped protectively in front of Marcus, its lips pulling back to show every razor-sharp tooth. The little girl, still sitting on the ground, looked back and forth between the warriors and Shadow. "Don't hurt him," she said in a small voice. "He was being nice." Before anyone could move, Princess Zaralyn arrived. She pushed through the crowd with 4 of her personal guards. Her white eyes took in the scene, the frightened crowd, the drawn weapons, Shadow standing protectively over Marcus. "Lower your weapons," she commanded. "But Princess," Commander Thekvol protested, "the creature threatened the child." "Did it harm her?" Thekvol hesitated. "No, but—" "Did it attack anyone?" "No, Princess, but you saw its eyes. You saw the intelligence." "There. It was calculating, measuring us for weakness." Zaralyn looked at Shadow. The creature stared back without flinching, but it had stopped growling. Its yellow eyes held an alertness that made her uncomfortable. "The human will leave immediately," she decided. "And the creature will not return to our village." "Princess," Marcus said carefully, "Shadow was only trying to comfort the child. On my world, we call this empathy. I care nothing for your world's words, human. What I saw was a predator studying potential prey. Your Shadow is learning about us, our weaknesses, our behaviors. That is how Shadow Maws hunt." Marcus wanted to argue, but he could see the fear in the crowd. Even if Shadow meant no harm, the Kethani would never see it that way. "Come on, Shadow," he said quietly. "We're going home." Shadow looked confused but followed Marcus out of the village. Behind them, the Kethani continued arguing about what they had witnessed. That evening, Marcus sat in his quarters with Shadow curled up beside him. The creature seemed to understand that something had gone wrong, but not what. Dr. Sarah Kim knocked on his door and entered without waiting for permission. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said. "The other researchers are getting nervous." "What happened?" "In the village today. People are talking. Shadow didn't do anything wrong." "Maybe not. But did you see his eyes when those weapons were pointed at you?" "There was something there, Marcus. Something that made my skin crawl." Marcus looked down at Shadow, who was now fast asleep and making gentle snoring sounds. "He was protecting me," Marcus said, "just like any loyal companion would. Or he was calculating how many enemies he could kill before they brought him down," Sarah replied. "Marcus, I care about you. But this creature is getting dangerous. It's not just size, it's developing the predator instincts of its species." "Before," Marcus could answer, a roar echoed across the jungle. It was deep and powerful, unlike any sound they had heard before. Shadow's eyes snapped open, and his entire body went rigid. Another roar answered from a different direction, then another. Shadow stood up slowly, his head tilted toward the jungle. His yellow eyes began to glow brighter, and a low rumble started in his throat. "What's happening?" Sarah whispered. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had studied enough predator species to recognize a territorial challenge when he heard it. Something big was coming, something that had caught Shadow's scent and didn't like what it found. The roars came again, closer this time. Shadow's rumble grew louder, and for the first time since hatching, he looked truly dangerous. Part 3. The test of blood, the roars continued through the night. Marcus didn't sleep at all. Shadow paced back and forth in the small room, his yellow eyes glowing brighter with each distant call. The creature had changed. His movements were different, more predatory. By morning, the entire research station was on edge. Dr. Sarah Kim had armed herself with a tranquilizer gun. The other researchers avoided Shadow completely. Marcus stood at the window, watching the tree line. Something was out there, something big. Shadow pressed against his side, trembling with nervous energy. "Easy, boy," Marcus whispered, but his own voice was shaking. The morning mist was just lifting when they saw it. At the edge of the jungle stood a massive shadow maw. It was 3 times Shadow's size, covered in scars and ritual markings carved into its scales. One of its eyes was missing, replaced by a twisted scar. Its remaining yellow eye burned with ancient hatred. "Holy hell," Sarah breathed from behind Marcus. Is that the bone render? Marcus said quietly. He had heard the stories from the Cathani. This creature was a legend, the most feared shadow maw alive. It had killed hundreds of Cathani warriors over the decades. The massive predator opened its mouth and roared. The sound shook the windows of the research station. It was a challenge, direct and unmistakable. Shadow's entire body went rigid. He answered with his own roar, much smaller but just as fierce. The sound that came from him was nothing like the gentle purring Marcus was used to. This was the voice of a true predator. "Marcus," Sarah said urgently. "We need to get out of here. Now." But Marcus couldn't move. He watched in horror as Shadow walked toward the door. The creature's movements were different now, flowing and deadly. Ancient instincts were awakening, instincts that millions of years of evolution had burned into. His DNA! "Shadow, no," Marcus called. "Stay here. Stay with me." Shadow paused at the door and looked back. For a moment, Marcus saw his gentle companion in those yellow eyes. But then the bone render roared again, and Shadow's civilized nature crumbled away. The creature pushed through the door and walked outside to face his challenger. Word spread quickly. Within an hour, both humans and Cathani had gathered to witness the battle. Princess Zaralyn arrived with 50 warriors, taking position on a hill overlooking the natural clearing where the two shadow maws faced each other. Marcus stood as close as he dared, his heart breaking as he watched Shadow transform. The creature he had raised with love and patience was becoming something else, something wild and dangerous. "Your experiment ends today, human," Zaralyn said, stopping beside him. "Look at your gentle creature now." Marcus couldn't argue. Shadow was crouched low, his lips pulled back in a snarl. Every muscle in his body was coiled for violence. He looked exactly like the monsters in Cathani legends. The bone render circled slowly, testing Shadow's reactions. The ancient predator had fought dozens of battles like this. He knew how to use his size and experience. Shadow was faster, but he was young and inexperienced. When the first attack came, he barely dodged the bone render's massive claws. The two creatures crashed together with tremendous force. Claws raked across scales, teeth snapped at throats. The sound of their battle echoed across the jungle. Marcus watched in horror as Shadow was thrown backward by a powerful blow. The young shadow maw hit a tree hard enough to crack the trunk. Blood ran down his side from deep claw marks. "Shadow!" Marcus started forward, but Cathani warriors blocked his path. "Let them finish it," Zaralyn commanded. "This is the way of nature." Shadow struggled to his feet, shaking his head to clear it. The bone render advanced slowly, confident in his victory. The ancient predator had seen this before, young challengers who thought they could defeat experience with speed alone. But as the bone render prepared for his killing blow, something strange happened. Shadow's eyes found Marcus in the crowd. For just a moment, the wild fury faded from his face. He made a soft, chirping sound, the same comforting noise he had made to the crying Cathani child. Marcus understood. Shadow was asking for permission. Even in the grip of primal instincts, the creature was still looking to his human father for guidance. "Be smart," Marcus called out. "Use your training." The bone render lunged forward, expecting Shadow to meet him head-on like a wild shadow maw would. Instead, Shadow dodged to the side, a move Marcus had taught him during their play sessions. The ancient predator's claws hit empty air. His momentum carried him past Shadow, exposing his scarred flank. Shadow could have struck then. His claws were positioned perfectly for a killing blow. Every wild instinct screamed at him to attack. Instead, he backed away. The watching Cathani gasped in shock. Zaralyn's eyes went wide. "Impossible," she whispered. The bone render spun around, confused and angry. No shadow maw had ever shown mercy in battle. It went against everything their species believed in. The ancient predator attacked again, more furiously this time. But Shadow had learned the lesson. He fought defensively, using speed and intelligence instead of pure aggression. Every move was calculated, controlled. Marcus felt tears running down his face. Shadow was fighting like a trained warrior, not a wild beast. The creature was using everything Marcus had taught him about restraint and thinking before acting. The battle continued for 20 minutes. The Bone Render was stronger and more experienced, but Shadow was smarter. He avoided the killing blows while landing precise strikes of his own. Finally, the ancient predator made a mistake. Exhausted and frustrated, he lunged too far forward. Shadow moved aside and grabbed the Bone Render's throat, not to kill, but to pin him down. The massive Shadow Maw struggled, but Shadow's grip was perfect. One squeeze would crush the ancient predator's windpipe. Everyone watching held their breath. Shadow looked at Marcus again. His yellow eyes were wild with bloodlust, but there was still intelligence there. Still choice. "Show mercy," Marcus whispered, knowing Shadow couldn't hear him, but hoping somehow the message would get through. Shadow held the grip for 5 more seconds. The Bone Render's struggles grew weaker. Death was one squeeze away. Then Shadow released him. The young Shadow Maw stepped back, allowing the defeated ancient predator to rise. The Bone Render staggered to his feet, blood running from multiple wounds. He stared at Shadow in complete confusion. No Shadow Maw had ever spared a defeated enemy. It simply didn't happen. Shadow opened his mouth and made a sound none of them had ever heard before. It was part roar, part command. Even without understanding the language, everyone could hear the authority in it. The Bone Render's head lowered in submission. The ancient killer, terror of the Kethani people, was bowing to a creature barely out of childhood. After a long moment, the Bone Render turned and limped back into the jungle. His territorial challenge had been answered and defeated. By the ancient laws of his species, Shadow now controlled this territory. Shadow watched him go, then walked slowly back toward Marcus. With each step, the wild predator faded away, replaced by the gentle creature Marcus knew. By the time Shadow reached him, the Shadow Maw was purring again. Marcus dropped to his knees and hugged Shadow's neck, not caring that the creature was covered in blood. "Good boy," he whispered. "You're such a good boy." The watching crowd was silent. They had witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about Shadow Maws. Princess Zara Lynn approached them slowly. Her white eyes were thoughtful, troubled. "Human," she said quietly. "What have you done?" Marcus looked up at her, tears still on his face. "I taught him that strength doesn't mean you have to kill." Zara Lynn stared at Shadow for a long moment. The creature looked back at her calmly, showing no aggression despite having just fought for his life. "This changes nothing," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "One act of mercy does not make a monster into a saint." As she walked away with her warriors, Marcus could see the doubt in her movements. Everything the Kethani believed about Shadow Maws had just been challenged. But Marcus had his own worries. As he examined Shadow's wounds, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Shadow's eyes were different now, brighter, more alert. And when the wind shifted, bringing scents from the deep jungle, Shadow's head tilted in a way that suggested he was listening to sounds Marcus couldn't hear. The victory over the Bone Render had awakened something in Shadow, something that Marcus wasn't sure his training could control. Part 4. The call of the wild 2 weeks had passed since the battle with the Bone Render. Shadow's wounds had healed, but Marcus noticed troubling changes in his behavior. The creature would disappear for hours at a time, returning with strange scents clinging to his scales. He stared into the deep jungle with an intensity that made Marcus nervous. Worst of all, Shadow had stopped sleeping in Marcus's room. Instead, he spent his nights on the roof of the research station, looking toward the darkness beyond the trees. "He's changing," Dr. Sarah Kim said as they watched Shadow from the lab window. "You can see it in the way he moves." Marcus nodded. sadly. Shadow's movements had become more fluid, more predatory. The playful creature who used to chase sticks was becoming something else entirely. Maybe it's just a phase, Marcus said, but he didn't believe it himself. That night, Marcus was awakened by a sound he had never heard before. It was musical, almost like singing, but deeper and more complex. The sound seemed to come from everywhere, at once. He looked out his window and saw Shadow standing at the edge of the clearing. The creature's head was tilted back, and his throat was vibrating. He was making the singing sound, calling out into the darkness. From the jungle came an answer, then another, and another. Shadow was talking to other shadow maws. The next morning, Shadow was gone. Marcus searched the entire area around the research station, calling Shadow's name until his voice was hoarse. There was no sign of the creature anywhere. Maybe it's for the best, Sarah said gently. He's returning to his own kind. His own kind tried to kill him, Marcus replied. I'm his family. But deep down, Marcus knew Sarah was right. Shadow was growing up, and his biological needs were stronger than the bonds Marcus had tried to create. Shadow returned 3 days later, but he wasn't alone. 2 other Shadow Maws followed him out of the jungle. They were smaller than Shadow, probably younger, with bright yellow eyes that held a wild intelligence. Unlike Shadow, these creatures had never been touched by human influence. They looked at the research station like predators studying prey. Marcus! Sarah's voice was tight with fear. Get inside, now! The 3 Shadow Maws stood at the edge of the clearing. Shadow was in the center, clearly the leader of this small pack. He looked toward the research station, and Marcus could see the conflict in his glowing eyes. Shadow chirped softly, the comforting sound Marcus knew so well. But when the wild Shadow Maws growled in response, Shadow's own expression hardened. Marcus understood what was happening. Shadow was trying to protect both his families. The humans who had raised him and the Shadow Maws who were his biological kin. But the 2 groups were natural enemies. Shadow! Marcus called out. Come here, boy, come home! Shadow took a step toward the station, then stopped. The wild Shadow Maws were watching him, waiting to see what he would choose. For a moment, Marcus thought Shadow would come back to him. But then one of the wild creatures made a complex series of sounds, almost like language. Shadow's head snapped toward the speaker, his eyes wide with surprise. Whatever the wild Shadow Maw had said, it changed everything. Shadow looked back at Marcus one last time. His yellow eyes held an emotion Marcus had never seen before. Sadness, mixed with determination. Then Shadow turned and led his pack back into the jungle. Princess Zara Lynn arrived at the research station that afternoon with a full war party. 100 Kethani warriors surrounded the facility, their weapons gleaming in the sunlight. Your creature has formed a pack, she announced when Marcus met her at the main entrance. 3 Shadow Maws now hunt together in our territory. This cannot be allowed. They haven't hurt anyone, Marcus protested. Yet. But they will. It is their nature. Zara Lynn's white eyes were hard as stone. I came to offer you a choice, human. Help us hunt down these creatures, or watch as we destroy your research station to get to them. Marcus felt his world falling apart. There has to be another way. There is. Zara Lynn's expression softened slightly. Under the ancient laws of my people, I can issue a formal challenge. Single combat to determine the fate of the pack. You want to fight Shadow? I want to test him. If your teachings have truly changed his nature, he will find a way to resolve this conflict without killing me. If not, she shrugged, then your experiment will have failed, and the creatures must die. Marcus stared at her in horror. You've seen what Shadow can do. He defeated the Bone Render. The Bone Render was old and wounded. I am young and trained. Zara Lynn's hand moved to her sword. But this is not about winning through strength, human. This is about proving whether your shadow has truly learned mercy or if he simply got lucky once. And if he kills you, then my warriors will destroy him and his pack immediately. Her smile was grim. But I do not intend to die today. Marcus wanted to refuse, but he could see the determination in the princess's eyes. She would attack the research station if he said no, and more people would die. When? He asked quietly. Tomorrow at dawn, in the sacred circle beside the river. Your shadow will come, I can guarantee that. How can you be sure? Zaralyn pointed toward the jungle. Because he is watching us right now. Marcus looked where she was pointing and felt his heart skip a beat. 3 pairs of yellow eyes gleamed in the shadows between the trees. Shadow and his pack had been listening to every word. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat on the roof of the research station, hoping Shadow would come to him one last time. Near midnight, his wish was granted. Shadow emerged from the jungle alone, moving with the silent grace of a true predator. But when he reached Marcus, something amazing happened. The creature's predatory stance melted away. His head lowered, and he made the soft chirping sound that Marcus remembered from when Shadow was just a hatchling. "Hey, boy," Marcus whispered, reaching out to touch Shadow's scales. "I've missed you." Shadow pressed against Marcus's hand, purring like he used to. For a few precious minutes, he was just a pet again, seeking comfort from his human father. But the moment couldn't last. Shadow pulled back and looked toward the jungle where his pack was waiting. Then he did something that shocked Marcus completely. Shadow opened his mouth and spoke. The words were rough, barely understandable, but definitely human language. "Tomorrow, Dangaraus, you stay away." Marcus's mouth fell open. "Shadow, you can talk?" Shadow's yellow eyes held a complex intelligence that Marcus had never fully appreciated before. "Learned. From pack. Old memories." What old memories? But Shadow was already backing away. "Must protect. Both fami lies." The words came easier now, as if speaking was awakening something in his mind. "Princess, not enemy. She tests. I understand." "Shadow, wait." But the creature was already disappearing into the jungle. His voice floated back through the darkness. "Trust me, Father." Marcus sat alone on the roof, staring into the night. Shadow could talk. Somehow, his pack had taught him language, which meant Shadow Maws were far more intelligent than anyone had ever suspected. And tomorrow, this incredible creature would face Princess Zaralyn in single combat, with the fate of both species hanging in the balance. Marcus closed his eyes and prayed to whatever gods might be listening. He had raised Shadow to be better than a monster. But tomorrow he would find out if his teachings were strong enough to overcome millions of years of evolution. In the distance, he could hear the wild Shadow Maws singing their complex songs, and for the first time, Marcus thought he could almost understand what they were saying. They were planning something that would change everything. Part 5. The ancient covenant dawn came too quickly. Marcus stood at the edge of the sacred circle beside the river, his heart pounding as he watched Princess Zaralyn prepare for battle. She wore light armor and carried only a sword and shield. Her white eyes were calm, focused. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said one last time. "Yes, I do." Zaralyn tested the weight of her sword. "My people need to know the truth about these creatures. Today, we will learn it." The sacred circle was ancient, a ring of standing stones carved with Kethani symbols. 50 warriors surrounded the area, their weapons ready. If Shadow killed their princess, they would destroy him instantly. Dr. Sarah Kim stood beside Marcus, her face pale with worry. "This is insane. You're going to get everyone killed." Before Marcus could answer, the Jungle fell silent. Even the birds stopped singing. Then Shadow emerged from the trees. But he wasn't alone. Behind him came his pack, the two younger Shadow Maws Marcus had seen before. But there were others now. 5 more creatures followed Shadow into the clearing, all of them different sizes and ages. 8 Shadow Maws in total. More than the Kethani had ever seen together. The warriors raised their weapons nervously. This wasn't what they had expected. Shadow walked calmly into the sacred circle. His yellow eyes found Marcus first, and he nodded slightly, a gesture that was purely human. Then he looked at Princess Zara Lynn. "Princess of the Kethani," Shadow said clearly. His voice was stronger now, more confident. "I accept your challenge." Zara Lynn's eyes widened. She had heard the reports that Shadow could speak, but hearing it herself was different. "You have learned our language well, creature." "Not your language," Shadow replied. "My own. My people spoke long before yours walked this world." The watching crowd murmured in confusion. Shadow's pack moved closer to the circle, their own eyes glowing with intelligence. "Your people are beasts," Zara Lynn said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Shadow's expression became sad. "We were not always beasts, Princess. Your ancestors made us into what you fear." "What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, Shadow turned to his pack and made a series of complex sounds. One of the older Shadow Maws stepped forward, a creature with silver-streaked scales and ancient scars. This elder Shadow Maw began to speak. Its voice was harsh, unused to human words, but understandable. "Long ago, we had cities. We had peace. We had language." Marcus felt his world shift. These weren't just intelligent predators. They were a fallen civilization. The elder continued, "Your people came from sky metal ships. We welcomed them, shared hunting grounds, shared knowledge." Zara Lynn's sword trembled in her hand. "Lies. You're making this up. The stone memories. Remember," the elder said, "hidden in deep caves. Pictures of peace. Pictures of trade." Shadow stepped closer to Zara Lynn. "Your people grew strong, needed more land, drove us from fertile valleys into deep jungle, called us monsters when we fought back." That's impossible," Zara Lynn whispered. "Generation by generation, we lost more," Shadow continued. "Lost our cities, lost our farms, lost our schools. Children grew up knowing only hunger and fear. Parents taught them to hunt, to kill, to survive. We became what you needed us to be. Monsters to justify your expansion." Marcus stared in shock. The pieces were falling into place. The Shadow Maws hadn't started as mindless predators. They had been reduced to it by centuries of displacement and persecution. "The last speakers died when my grandfather was young," Shadow said. "The old knowledge nearly died with them. Until now," he gestured to his pack. "They found me after I defeated the Bone Render, smelled something different, a Shadow Maw who remembered gentleness. They brought me to the hidden caves, showed me the stone memories, taught me the old words." The elder Shadow Maw spoke again. "He bridges 2 worlds, remembers what we were, shows what we could be again." Zara Lynn looked around at the watching faces, human and Kethani alike. Everyone was listening with growing amazement and horror. "Even if this is true," she said quietly, "it doesn't change what you've become. Your people have killed thousands of mine." "Your people killed thousands of ours first," Shadow replied. "But killing more won't bring back the dead. It will only create more orphans, more hatred, more monsters." He stepped back and lowered his head. "I submit to your challenge, Princess, but not to fight you, to show you a different way." "What do you mean?" Shadow looked up at her, his yellow eyes blazing with intelligence. Strike me down if you wish. Prove that violence is the only answer. Or, he paused. Help me find a better path. Zara Lynn raised her sword, but her hand was shaking. My people expect justice for centuries of attacks. Justice, yes. But what kind? Shadow's voice was gentle now. The kind that creates more enemies? Or the kind that heals old wounds? The princess looked around the circle. Her warriors were watching her closely, waiting for her decision. The human researchers held their breath. The Shadow Maw Pack stood silently, ready to accept whatever fate she chose. What do you propose? Zara Lynn asked finally. Shadow stepped forward carefully, staying just out of sword range. Territory in the deep jungle, away from your villages. We will hunt only wild creatures, never livestock or people. In return, we ask for recognition, not as monsters, but as a people trying to rebuild. And if your people break this agreement, then you hunt us down and destroy us all. Shadow's voice was firm. I will be personally responsible for every member of my species on this world. Zara Lynn stared at him for a long moment. Around the T-circle, her warriors waited for her command. One word from her would start a massacre. Instead, she lowered her sword. The ancient laws speak of honorable enemies, she said slowly. Enemies who follow rules of war, who can be reasoned with, who keep their word. I have never seen a Shadow Maw show honor before today. She sheathed her sword completely. Very well, Shadow of the Shadow Maws. I will give you one chance. But know this, if any of your people harm mine, I will hold you personally responsible. Shadow bowed deeply, a gesture that was both human and somehow deeply Shadow Maw. You have my word, princess, and the word of my people. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the hill overlooking both the Kethani village and the new Shadow Maw settlement in the valley below. The two communities were still separate, still wary, but they were no longer at war. Shadow had kept his promise. The Shadow Maws hunted only in the deep jungle, taking only what they needed to survive. Slowly, carefully, they were beginning to rebuild their lost culture. It's remarkable, Dr. Sarah Kim said, joining Marcus on the hilltop. Who would have thought that raising one creature with kindness could change the fate of an entire species? Marcus smiled as he watched Shadow teaching a group of young Shadow Maws in the valley below. The lesson wasn't about hunting or fighting. It was about language, about the old stories carved in stone, about remembering what they had been before fear and hatred had reduced them to monsters. It wasn't just kindness, Marcus said. It was seeing past the surface to what they could become. Everyone assumed Shadow Maws were mindless predators because that's all they had been allowed to be. In the distance, Princess Zara Lynn could be seen meeting with Shadow at the border between their territories. The meetings happened weekly now, working out details of their new agreement. Think it will last? Sarah asked. Marcus watched as a young Kethani child, under careful supervision, offered a flower to a baby Shadow Maw. The little creature accepted it gently, its yellow eyes bright with curiosity rather than hunger. It'll last, Marcus said, confidently. Because both sides finally have something worth fighting for. A future where their children don't have to be afraid of each other. Shadow looked up from his teaching and spotted Marcus on the hill. The great creature raised one clawed hand in a wave, a gesture that was both greeting and goodbye, both wild and civilized. Marcus waved back, his heart full of pride for the small creature he had raised, who had become something greater than anyone had ever imagined possible. Sometimes the greatest victories came not from conquest, but from the simple act of treating someone as more than what they appeared to be.